Well, welcome to the subscriber briefing for the Sunshine Club. I can't believe we're here. I cannot believe we're here. We are here on the lands of the Yagara and the Turrbal people. Stories have been told on these lands for tens of thousands of years. And the thrill that we have tonight to include this revival of the Sunshine Club, to bring back a work onto the lands that it was written for, led by the extraordinary Wesley Enoch. Well, the thrill is huge, and you know that I'm typically overexcited anyway, so I'm bursting tonight. Now, you'll be seeing that there should be 17 other people on this stage, but we've been wrestling with COVID in the last week, so we're keeping them separated and away and not in the public space. So it is my great pleasure to be able to focus on the creative team that is bringing the work to life. Of course, the work was written many years ago by Wesley Enoch and John Rogers. John's not here with us tonight, but he has arrived in the building, and which is very exciting to have both of the original creators to bring this together. I'm not going to keep talking; they're going to talk. You want to hear them speak. You hear me speak all the time. So, if all of you would like to introduce yourselves, we're going to go this way. Kat, you can start and tell us what you're doing.
My name's Kat and I'm the stage manager.
Yay! Hello, I'm Jake Nash. I'm a Daly River man, but I'm living down in Eora. But I grew up here in Brisbane, and Wes and I have done a few things together. But this is my first show with Queensland Theatre, and really happy to be designing what you're seeing not quite finished behind you.
Hi everyone, my name's Ben Hughes, I'm the lighting designer.
Hello everyone, I'm Derek Wilson and I'm the sound designer.
And hello, I'm Richard Roberts and I'm the costume designer.
Good evening, I'm Wayne Freer, I'm the musical director.
And I'm Wesley Enoch. I'm the director and also the writer of the book and lyrics of the Sunshine Club.
Now, of course, Wesley, the first question is going to be for you. And look, if you have a burning question at any point, just put your hands up. We're all family, so I'll look across and you can speak, and then I'll probably repeat the questions so that everyone can hear. But Wesley, you are the time traveller, the primary time traveller in this. It was 1997 or 8 when this was commissioned, and you were a young man. I wouldn't say at the top of your game, but you were given this commission to create. What was the original brief?
Just in terms of the timing too, like people remember Deborah Malman and I wrote The 7 Stages of Grieving in 1995, of which Robin Nevin then saw that, and she said, come and direct Radiance in 1997 for the company. It was her inaugural season as artistic director. And after that, she went, right, what else do you have in you? And Nick Enright, who people remember, an amazing playwright and director and teacher, he and I were doing a number of things together, hanging out and talking about work and things. And he heard of this club in Perth called Kuburu Club, Kuburu, which is the local word for the magpie, the black-white together. And he said, I've heard of these clubs. And I went, yeah, we had something similar in Brisbane. And in fact, as the research showed, something all around the country. So he and I went to Robin Nevin and said, this is a very interesting idea. What do you think about this? And Nick, being as gracious as he is or was, it's 20 years now since he passed away, he said, well, Wesley, you can write it. And I went, can I? And Robin said, yes, you go for it. And so it was this wonderful thing. I was 28. I'd done a couple of shows around the place. In fact, Richard and I had worked on Stolen by then in 1998. And there was a sense of saying, okay, well, go for it. And being precocious and arrogant and entitled and all the things, I didn't know what I didn't know. And there was a sense of saying, yeah, let's do it. And the original cast included the wonderful David Page, who's since passed away. Also, Ursula Jovic. It was her second ever show. Elaine Crombie, it was her professional debut. Wayne Blair, it was his only third show ever since graduating university, the first time with the Queensland Theatre Company at the time. And so there's a sense of like this whole group of people who were starting out. Stephen Page was the choreographer of the work. And so there's an incredible sense of journeyman artists going, okay, well, let's find out, or even apprentice artists in some respects, let's find out what was possible. And you can remember too, maybe some of you weren't born yet, but that idea in the late 90s of reconciliation was a very big, important idea. And this sense of black and white dancing together was actually the impetus for the Sunshine Club. And, you know, people remember John Howard was the Prime Minister of the day, and he was refusing to say sorry for the stolen generations. He was refusing to talk about constitutional change in terms of a republic. He was actually putting a whole lot of roadblocks into the kind of social changes that were maybe possible. And this notion of reconciliation becoming a people's movement, not a political-led movement, was a big idea. And saying, as part of that, we need to remember that reconciliation wasn't something that was just invented in the late 80s. There were things that were happening all the way through the history of our country that have been bringing black and white together. And so this idea of post-World War II, like Aboriginal servicemen go off to war in World War II, they come home and they go, great, I fought for freedoms, I fought for a change in the world, and now I'm going to live that freedom in my own country, and realizing that perhaps it wasn't as free. And so these clubs all around the country sprung up to celebrate this idea of reconciliation before we even called it that. And one of the big ideas that we've talked about too is, why do this show now? And it was great, QPAC and Queensland Theatre coming together to put this show on. This notion of, what is it that we're talking about now? 20-something years ago, and about 30 kilos ago, there was a sense of hope that the world was about to change. And now we have that same kind of hope. When our new Prime Minister gets up and says, actually, the Uluru Statement from the Heart has to be listened to. We do have to consider what it means to embrace our First Nations history. We now have to think about what a voice to Parliament could be. And I argue to, I was talking to the Federal Arts Minister, not the other one, she can shut up, but that the Federal Arts Minister talking about, it's all very well and good to have a voice to Parliament, but what is our voice to the people? What is our voice where we share stories and tell truths and make a shift and change? And that's what we need to do now, is that we, through telling these stories and giving a long sense of history to this debate, discussion, means that we can actually progress in a different way. And so this idea that the voice to the people is often through sport and art, and that through our art we actually tell complex stories and different arguments and debates, because, you know, good theatre, in this case, needs to be able to tell both sides of a story, needs to have conflict and drama to play itself out. And there's something about us doing a revival of this show 20-something years later of something that was then 70 years before. There's something that leapfrogging through time, this idea of how elders have been talking about this for a very, very long time, and how we're kind of shifting the debate each time a generation steps forward. And who knows, you know, maybe this is something that we'll see in another 20 years, about returning to a work like this to go, how far have we grown? Have we grown at all? What do we need to be reminded of? And what changes still need to exist?
It is one of the, yeah. Our stories are one of the ways we measure change, or lack thereof. So I'm looking forward to the revival 20 years from now, Wesley. I'm looking forward to my invitation. And whether or not you're directing it, I fully intend to be sitting next to you having a conversation about where next. But let's go back a little bit again to Wayne. You were the original musical director on this?
Yes, that's right. I was a bit older than me. I was 34.
And had you worked with Wesley before?
No, I think that's the first time we worked together. We probably did about 8 shows after that. Excuse me. None of them this big though. Often Wesley's shows have musicians on stage being part of the play, somehow woven into that. But this one is probably the biggest one of those, I'd say. So we have a wonderful 5-piece jazz band on stage, which is of a quality you might see it anywhere else as well. But having it on a theatre stage really does lift things. Yeah, we've been wildly rehearsing away for the last couple of days. Sorry, I got a croaky throat. Because yes, I had COVID last week. Testing 1 stripe today, but yeah, we've had to fast track all of that, and the band are really having a lovely time. Yeah.
So now the first performances of this were up in Cairns, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And then it went on the road in the state before it made it to Brisbane, and then it went on to have a life down south. But do you remember the first performance of it?
It was all a blur, really. We were really quite busy developing it. The show back then was quite different in structure. It changed to go down to Sydney and it went down to Sydney Theatre Company and the Opera House a little bit. There's an extra song, and there was 2 songs that aren't in it. So quite a few scenes that are different. So we're doing one that's a bit more like the Sydney show, I suppose.
I should just tell that story where it was the year 2000. It was the Opera House, the drama theatre of the Opera House. David Page, who had played the role in Brisbane, Cairns, Mackay and Townsville, had given his nephew a skateboard and had broken his ankle over Christmas. I know. And so we'd had to put another actor in and all that kind of stuff. It was quite stressful. And we got to the point where we went, we think we've got the wrong song for this particular character. And we were going, oh no, it needs to be an origin story, not a reflective story. And so we went through and went, okay, well, what are we going to do? So we wrote the lyrics, we faxed it, remember faxes? Faxed it to John Rogers, who was still in Brisbane at the time, that one afternoon. The next morning I got a 6 a.m. flight. We had a preview that night. 6 a.m. flight, flew to Brisbane, sat with John for 2.5 hours, wrote a song, faxed it back to Sydney, flew to Sydney, rehearsed it in, and got it into the next preview that next night. And it was one of those things where you go, and that song is in this version of the show because it was the right song. This was Salon Man. And the sense too that everything was up for grabs. I think that this version we call draft, what do we call this one? Draft 9 or draft 10? And they said, you only did 10 drafts. And I go, oh no, draft 1 was 19 drafts. And they said, no, it's really all the same one. So just call it now draft 2. And so changes upon changes upon changes and honing the story all the time. Opening night in Cairns, 2 days earlier I turned 30. And I have a lot of family living in Cairns, and they turned up to see the show. And I remember being so nervous, going, what does this mean? I'm a huge fraud. And that moment when the audience laughed and cried and reflected what was being said on stage, and there was this really kind of amazing kind of sense of uplift, and then going, wow. And then afterwards, talking to Robin Nevin and Nick Enright and others saying, right, now the changes can begin. And the changes just kept happening. It was one of those things we don't do in this country very often, do we, Lee? Where we have this out-of-town tryouts where we get to preview a show and work on the show. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And the band grew. Hands up those people who actually saw it in Brisbane in 1999. Oh, look at you. Hopefully you'll be able to notice some of the shifts and changes that have been made to this version. Because otherwise you'd just be bored. But that idea that each version changed and changed again. And it just made it a better show. And we just don't get that for new writing in this country in the same way.
No, we don't. In fact, you're not getting it on this one either. So any changes?
Maybe.
No, look, I think there is such an energy packed inside this script. I had heard of it. I'd just come back to Australia when Sunshine Club was on in Sydney. And so I'd heard of it and it was in my distant memory, but I was going back through the archives of Queensland Theatre going, okay, what would be a great work to revive? You know, it's what you do as an artistic director. You read a lot and and you wait for a script to do the work for you. So it feels when you're reading it that there's an inevitability. And this script landed, we didn't have it to hand, we had to find it. It came into me, and one of the producers brought it into me and said, oh, this is the script you were looking for. I was like, yeah, okay. And I remember sitting down and just the script, didn't have the music or anything like that, but just the story came up off the page and I went, oh yeah, we have to do this. And so the idea of bringing a story back has to feel inevitable, like the right time. I don't know, there's some magic in the right time to bring something back. But it's one thing for me to think that. It's another thing to go back to the original artists. I had no idea what the relationship of those artists to the work would be. You don't know what you're digging up. And then all of the telephone calls that go from the original, hey Wesley, what about this? I don't know how it went from there, but it happened very easily and very quickly that everybody said yes to coming back. Richard, you were the original designer. What happened when that phone call happened and you kind of went, oh, right, Sunshine Club? What was that moment for you, thinking about it again?
Well, I think Sunshine Club, I always had an incredible kind of affection for as a piece to work on right from the word go. Actually, Wesley mentioned it before. We had just done this play called Stolen, and it was a year later, I think, that he handed me a copy of the first draft and said, was I interested in it, and we started from there. And it right from the word go, it was a really special project, I think. You know, it was there was this incredible opportunity to refine it and do this sort of long out-of-town tryout, and then it came into Brisbane and then eventually ended up at the Opera House. So it had this very rare opportunity to sort of shape and change and refine, which made it very special. It was also because when you're with a group of actors and other members of the creative team for a long period like that, you really do become like a very close family, you know, particularly when you start out in a place like Cairns and we're all staying up in a hotel up there. And so it was a very special thing. And I can remember when it finished in Sydney thinking, oh, wouldn't it be fabulous if that had another life one day? And then, of course, 20 years go by. And then suddenly the phone rings and I couldn't say yes fast enough, I must say, so... yeah.
Can I just throw a little story in here, a little anecdote? Yes, there was like a family, but a family that kind of built other forms of relationships.
Oh, that's right.
And that Kristen O'Leary, who you'll know as a fantastic actor, married the trumpet player.
Yeah.
So Andrew McNaughton, who was the trumpet player? Yes, trumpet.
Yeah.
That's right. There was a beautiful song in the show that she sang called "Let It Rain," and he played a beautiful trumpet solo on that. Let me tell you,
enough to make him get married.
It was the
power of music.
She was dancing in the rain. He was playing the trumpet. Say no more.
Yeah. Actually, because we're looking through stock and using stock, because trying to make the costumes look as real, like real vintage clothes as possible. And QT have a pretty fabulous store, actually. Thanks a lot, I think, to a lot of brilliant donations that come in from people like you to the costume store. Anyway, I'm looking through them and we've found things from the original production. Like the other day, I'm looking for a tie for one of the actors and I grabbed it. I thought, this is a really nice period tie. Why don't you try that? And turned it over and it was Andrew's. Oh. So we're going to give it to one of the band members. So yeah, there's a few things like that.
The policeman's outfit.
The policeman's outfit is the same one that was worn. And we keep finding, as I get deeper and deeper, they have got a bit buried in under 20 years of other costumes, but we're winkling them out of there. It's really great.
But of course, putting those costumes on the next generation of performers, was a little bit back to you. There are what's it like to actually have both the memory of performance in your head and seeing it come to life with these new and incredibly excited young performers, the next generation of people who are picking this up? I had the great privilege of being in the room the other day and watching the excitement build in them, but also watching them know that they're walking in the shoes of some of their heroes. There are a couple of very young performers in there making their Queensland Theatre debuts, and so the energy is probably not unlike the excitement of the original group. But of course, they've got the confidence of knowing they're working in a work that works. It's not new; it's celebrated. What is that like as a director, Wesley? I've never had that experience.
Look, I think, number one, I've got the memory of a sieve. So, like the idea of going, oh, what was that show? One of the reasons why we couldn't find the script is because I didn't have a copy of it. It had been lost. One of my laptops somewhere had been stolen, and I'd never backed it up, and it had been gone forever. Except it was fantastic to look at the archives that both Queensland Theatre, the State Library of Queensland, and also the Sydney Theatre Company kept all these archives. This script would not be alive today if it wasn't for those recordings and things. And I remember going, oh, wow, I should watch it again, see if it's even worth watching. And I remember just going, oh, I'll watch 10 minutes of it just to kind of get a sense of it again. And 2.5 hours later at 1:30 in the morning, I'm going, okay, this is worth doing again. There's something about it. And it brought back this rush of memories and trauma, but rush of memories about what it meant. And I was saying before, David Page, who this was his first ever professional acting debut. Well, you only get one debut anyway, but like he'd done a couple of other bits and pieces, but this was his professional acting debut. And it was only because Stephen Page had said to me, you should audition David. You should see if David wants to do it. And I went, oh, really? Okay, why not? And he was extraordinary. We went on to work, like Wayne and many of the people here do, maybe another dozen shows together before he passed away. And this wonderful sense of his voice coming back, when you've experienced loss, and that there's a performer's voice that happens when they get to speak again to you. And it's such a wonderful thing. And also there's a young Ursula Jovic and Elaine Crombie and Tessa Rose and Kamahi Jordan King, who are now all old people. How did that happen?
You're only saying that because they're not here to beat you for saying
Absolutely,
that.
they can try. No, but there's wonderful sense that they were all going on. And when we were having this chat about, should we do this again? This idea of going, yes, but we should commit to the next generation. That's what this was taking the risk on the next generation. There are 12 actors and 5 in the band, so 17 all up on stage. And out of those 12 performers, 10 have never performed to a Queensland Theatre before. A lot of First Nations voices coming up. And the two that have, actually now it's changed a bit anyway, but I'm going to stick with the story. The two that have are Roxanne Mcdonald, who's reprising the role that she played 20-something years ago. In fact, she tells a story. She goes, Wesley, I don't need the grey wig anymore. She's kind of grown into the grey hair. And also Andrew Buchanan, who is also kind of grey-haired. We were having an argument. Richard and I were going back and forward because we were looking, who could play the Reverend? Who could play the Reverend? And Richard said, what about Andrew Buchanan? I said, no, he's too young. He's only like a year older than me.
I didn't say anything there.
No. But yes, he is old enough to have a 22-year-old daughter. So yes, there's a lot of that stuff going on. But there is this wonderful thing of sometimes when you're listening to something you know well or have known well, that you try to go, what's the rhythm of the performers that have done it before, and what are the rhythms of the script? And listening to actors, and Nayara's here, I just see her up the back, who plays Pearl, and this wonderful sense of actually saying, no, you've got to give yourself over to what this next generation is wanting from this story, their rhythms, their ways of looking at things. And we had a wonderful discussion about this, and I kept going, no, this character has to be broken and in tears and falling apart and all that stuff. And then going, and Nayara is giving us some different energy. And I was going, no, she can be angry and upset and kind of use her strength to get through these moments. And that's what's wonderful when you see a new generation, that they provide a different way of seeing the world. A side note, you know that millennials are now equal demographically to baby boomers. And there's this whole sense of saying, you know, just in the last census, that information came out. And the great warning for older generations is you have to protect and look after these people, because they are going to look and protect you into the future democratically. And so if this younger generation wants something new, something different, how do we actually give that to them? Because if we don't, we will lose the next generation of people who love theatre. We will lose a generation of hope because we're not doing enough on climate change. You know, I'm speaking to the converted here, you know, but how do we actually give opportunities to the next generation? And I think in 20 years' time, it shouldn't be me directing it. I mean, old man, move on. But what would the next generation make of this particular work? And how do we do that for almost everything we do? I mean, the challenge, I think, for everyone in this house is to go, actually, how are we passing on both the ephemeral stories of theatre, the things that we love and think are important, but also how are we passing on our love of telling stories? What are we doing for the next generation that they feel part of this millennial old process of sitting and communing together in a theatre? Because it's not something that is going to go away, but it will be under threat if we don't pass that love on to the next generation as well, by donating to Queensland Theatre at any time, anywhere.
Note to self, always bring back past artistic directors, because, you know, they do a lot of my work for me. This is wonderful. Now, that thing of letting the new energy in, Ben and Jake, what was your relationship to the idea of Sunshine Club, and what have been the surprising things of coming to this story as next generation makers?
Well, I guess for me, I spend a lot of my time at Bangarra. I've been there for a long time, and the Sunshine Club for me was this, as Wesley was saying, I've sort of worked with a lot of the actors who were in it, but it was mythical for me because every time I'd walk into David's studio, there was the picture and the program of the Sunshine Club. And so I kind of knew it, but I didn't know anything about it. I was a little bit younger when it first debuted, and I kind of missed it. But I guess in a really beautiful way, we're talking about, you know, transition of knowledge and sharing, and what is the future and this generation talking about. And I was really lucky to spend time with Wes and Richard and like listen to the conversations of what it was and what it is now and how they wanted to approach it. And as a designer, that's a really lovely thing to be a part of, because you're already inside a conversation and they've got this backstory and they're opening the door for you visually to sort of explore things. And for me, that was exciting. And also, you know, of course, it's a really amazing story with this sort of powerful message, but it does it in a way. I think we've had so much sort of COVID, Black Lives Matter, lots of trauma over the last couple of years, and this story holds that trauma with hope. And I think for an audience, pardon me, and for a designer, that sort of opens the door too, because you're looking for something to hold in your hands and then give it to a gift, firstly to the performers and then to the audience. So that's kind of how I connected to it. Yeah.
I have to say, but everybody who's been watching Bangarra's work, and most of Jake's work's been down south and around the world over the last 15, 20 years, right? It's lovely to have you home.
Yeah, it's lovely to be home, actually. I think one of the first things I did out of when I went to NIDA was up here with Coimbra, and that was sort of just next door in the smaller space, I can't remember, Cremorne. And it's that thing, and I think it's with Bangarra too, it's about, Stephen, the Pages, we have so many, people and dancers and community and all from up here. And so it is like coming home. And I think this story, it feels like Brisbane. Like it feels like this place you can sort of, for me, I understand it. And like Wesley was saying, the narrative is inside you and the locations and the way people speak. So yeah, it holds that for me as well, which is
Brisbane when it's sunny, though. Thank you, everyone, for coming out in this cold, I have to say. What about you, Ben? You've got the hardest job of all, because your work comes once everything is made, right? You're just...
And solves all our problems.
Running joke. It was when I was first starting work in theatre. Sunshine Club had just happened, I think. It was a thing. So it was certainly something I heard about, and I had this little thing in the back of my head when Wesley called me about it. I'm like, I remember that. I know what that is. But I never saw it. I think I was probably out, being 17, 18 and partying too hard. But it was a really great thing when Wes called, because it's we haven't done a show together for a while. And so that level of reconnection is amazing. But then to see the team, and Wesley started talking about, okay, so Richard's going to come back and do this, but then Jake's going to do this, and I'm thinking about doing it in this way and putting a bit of a spin on it and so on. And that was exciting to me, because it wasn't talking about doing a show from 20 years ago and just trying to remount it and saying what makes it relevant today and why are we doing it today, and starting with that premise. And it didn't take long for you to convince me. I think I was saying yes straight away after that. And it's been an extraordinary experience just to see what this new generation of talent on stage is doing, and a lot of people I've never worked with before, and how that happens. And working with Jake's been amazing. We realise we're roughly the same age, grew up in Brisbane at the same time, so a lot of understandings about things that you might have done when you were a kid together. Make from that what you will. No, it's just been extraordinary, and I really can't wait till we actually get on stage and get to do it. And we're very close. It doesn't look like there's much happened here at the moment, but actually this will go together very quickly now. There's so much preparation to get, as you can see, all these different things hang in the air and so on. That takes a lot of time, and then the rest of it will just suddenly happen, and by tomorrow afternoon, it'll look like a real show. So, we hope. Touch wood.
Now, at the moment, over at the Bill Brown, we've got Robin Archer downstairs in the theatre. We had young artists doing a production of An Enemy of the People in the Diane Salento studio. We've got the Scene Project rehearsing in the Murray Foy rehearsal room, and then Sunshine Club in the large rehearsal room. So there was nowhere for the band to rehearse. So the lovely thing is that they've been in the function room, which is upstairs on the same level as the administrative offices. And so we've had the music in the office, and hearing the sounds come together today. Wayne, can you give us a little bit of a sense of the musical story insofar as the sound space that this great universe of Sunshine Club is, and what it is to actually gather that all up again?
Yeah. So as I was saying, it's a jazz band, but John Rogers, the most prolific Queensland composer ever, I'd imagine. Also a mate of mine for 35 years. Anyway, he likes to make things, when he's writing music, he likes to make them a little bit too difficult for everybody to play, and then by the time you've worked out how to do it, you're a much better musician. That's his base model. So everything goes a little bit left field and not where you'd say it was. So we've got Steve Newcomb, who's the head of jazz here at the Con, on the piano, on a beautiful old piano. He's a wonderful player. I'm playing the tuba and the double bass, same old thing I used to. And we've got a young woman on the drums, another young woman on saxophones and bass clarinet, and a fella playing the trumpet and the accordion, which is pretty normal double as well. So yes, can you play the accordion, Michael? No, but I'm willing to have a go at it. That's our guy. So you've got to always stretch out a little bit outside yourself. So I'd say 60% of the music is all different sorts of jazz from, there's a song that we decided today that we were going to play it like the Muppets because that was the best idea to get it across. I won't tell you which one.
Oh, right.
You don't want to know that. So there's jazz from across a 40-year span, a very big Latin number, which is kind of Cuban, which is the eponymous number of the show. And then it also goes into some musical theatre tropes, a very beautiful duet, unlike I've never ever heard before. And there's also some things that are also operatic in that they are almost like some very bent Bach, like if you crossed Bach with Thelonious Monk. So anyway, it broadens the senses and certainly heightens everything. And it's been lovely making a big noise in QT in the last couple of days for all the people in the office.
One of the things too is looking at the period of time. So let's call it the late 40s, early 50s. So everything from Hollywood movie kind of musicals through to Kurt Weill and those kind of influences. Come along and listen because there are all these different lines that go through like a musical, and you can go, oh, if you keep your ear out, you can. Or come and see it maybe 4 or 5 times. But that idea of going, you can actually see this track through of certain musical notes and sequences that especially there's one particular moment where it goes up into the falsetto, you know.
Exactly how it is.
It's just like that, but better. But there's wonderful little thing, and you can go, oh, actually, there it is. Oh, there it is again. There it is again, from different voices along the way. And so it's got this. It is a very period piece, but not just caught in that kind of 1940s, 1950s musical. It's caught up in a whole lot of conversation about the theatre history of that period of time as well.
So all of this is coming together, and the person who's got to steer it ultimately is sitting to my left. Kat, what is this moment for you in production? Because the room is still going full tilt, but that's happening in the rehearsal room, and everybody's craving the real information. This is all about to happen. When do you come into here, and what's exciting you most?
So we'll move over tomorrow night out of the rehearsal room. We'll pack up all of our props, bring them all over here. The most exciting thing is, as you say, is when everything first comes onto stage for the first time. So when the cast come onto stage, once we see everything lit up and everything, we hear the sound, see the set, see the costumes, everyone. That's the magic. When everyone's here and we go, oh, here it is. This is what we've been building. This is what we've been working. That's the magic.
Okay. What's the most impossible moment from your point of view in the play that you don't know if you're going to pull it off? Of course we're going to pull it off. It's the magic of theatre, right? But there's always one moment.
It's never the moment you think. You can think that it's going to be this moment, and it'll be something from left field.
Yeah, okay, which moment do you think it's going to be?
I don't know. Probably the one that's going to, I think, trip us up until we figure it out is the Sunshine Club when we first build it, just because it's very complex. It's so many moving parts. Everyone's on stage, everyone's running around and singing and dancing at the same time. But yeah, I think
it's a 20-page sequence that has music underplaying all of it, as well as things flying in and trucking in and set items kind of being brought in by actors. It'll be a lot of fun. Can I just celebrate Kat and the stage management team at the moment? Some of us are wearing masks because COVID hit us last week. And I was on Zoom directing.
From bed.
From a bed. Terrible thing, this terrible kind of like lying in the bed going, oh, I think I'm going to fade away. And he's like, no, I'm here. I'm fine. I'll just turn my camera off for a second. But Kat and the stage management team, I mean, a musical is like a machine. Every cog, every crank, everything needs to keep rolling along. You know, there are a rehearsal schedule with 3 or 4 rooms working at any one time, including, you know, wig fittings, costume fittings, mic fittings, the choreographic calls, music calls, stage calls. There's all of this stuff, publicity calls, and Kat and her team are amazing. And we don't often bring stage management to these play briefings because, you know, they don't like being on stage. But Kat
We're
really
also
wanted to
usually
be.
too busy.
Kat volunteered to be on stage today. But to celebrate the machinery of theatre, the work that it takes to get it on, and she's being a little bit modest about the level of detailed kind of, who's buying which prop where, what's going on, the minute taking for meetings, all of this stuff that happens. Stage management are the unsung heroes of what we do in terms of making the work on stage. And I think that stage management in particular, it's a thankless task with very little career pathing. And just, how long have you been a stage manager for, Kat?
I started in 2008.
So you go, are you good yet? No, see, no, you're brilliant. But this notion of going, what does it mean to look after stage management in particular, and just a fantastic team of women, really strong women who keep us all kind of rolling along. So I just want to celebrate Kat and the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you.
And literally all of the moments of the play come through the bodies of the stage managers. That, like, artistically, they're the person that pulls moment together insofar as timing, performance. It all centers around that, and it's extraordinary, not invisible to us, but should be invisible from the audience's point of view, moment in production. And it's interesting looking at this huge space and what it is to activate it and bring it to life, and looking at the timber on the floor and all the cables that are waiting for the weight of the ideas that'll be hung there. I guess my question, again, bringing it back to you, Wesley, is there a tension inside the play between what you created when you were 28 and what you're feeling now? Is there a tension, like a good tension, or I don't know, what is the nature of that tension?
There is a conversation going on with a younger me, which is, I felt at 28, as I said before, precocious and arrogant and entitled and said everything could happen. And now at 53, this notion of going, actually, what compromises have I made to get where I am, and are they really worth it? In terms of my writing output is hardly any. I don't write anymore, or I haven't for a long time. The sense too of going, I can be caught up in the administrivia of the world, or being involved in that stuff rather than making change or making shifts. And I think, all of us who have got to a certain age realize that too, that we can get caught up in the compromises of living and the compromises of management and organisation. But there's something to be said for going back and having a talk with that younger idealistic self to say, actually, you can now be a little bit harder here, or you can be a little bit, push a little further, or all that stuff. And not be scared to have an argument if you need to have an argument. It's okay, we'll get through it. It's not a big problem. And so there's this part of me that goes, I like to build really strong, robust groups of people, families of people. I think that's really important. But also, like all families, it's good to have a little bit of an argument, and have a bit of a kind of test the boundaries of things. And I think I haven't done enough testing or getting angry enough. So
and thank you for
fired. You're all fired. Get out. No, not even. But like Derek and I, we've had some of our kind of conversations around the miking and how this works, and trying to work out values along the way. And I think often we think of sound design as a very technical kind of pursuit, but in many ways, it's as much about values as anything else.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and I'm not sure quite what to say to that, actually.
Well, why is it that? What do you see in designing the sound for a show like this? What's important for you?
Yeah, I had a moment in the rehearsal room, actually. One of the really emotional parts of the show, where Marcus is expressing, and I was just in tears, And I just hope to be able to bring that to all of you. You know, what I felt standing right next to him. That's what I like to bring.
It is that thing, isn't it, Garrett? Because the privilege of the rehearsal room is getting to be so physically close to the creative moment. You're standing 2 feet away from an extraordinary artist like Marcus Corowa, and that voice happens and it's going physically right through you there, and you want to find a way to give that direct experience to this large and beautiful house. And we can do it. It's sort of the magic of technology that's been built over the many years to help transmit that. But to do it with honor and to do it, balance it so beautifully that it sits inside the work, that's the art of what you do, Garrett. But it's always also at this moment, I always think it's kind of like it's like a little bit like a dessert that hasn't quite set yet in the rehearsal room, and you're very carefully carrying it out, hoping that it doesn't lose its shape, because the shape that starts to take form in that rehearsal room is so precious. It's the magic of this group of artists coming together and very quickly and magically creating very real relationships. But then they have to survive the transition to this space. And the rehearsal room's kind of tiny relative to this space. There's not that much air. It's like it's an office ceiling. And then you come in here and I always go, oh my God, you're right, the air is so big in here. And of course it needs to be in a lot. And this is, you were saying, Wesley, what's the joke about this particular space? It's the most beautiful.
The quote is, the most beautiful external theatre is in Sydney. The most beautiful acoustic and working theatre is here in Brisbane. That this is regarded around the country as one of the best playhouses in the country. Both the acoustics and the layout and like the Arts Centre in Melbourne, woeful. The Dunstan in Adelaide, outdated. The Drama Theatre in the Opera House, so compromised. But this is like beautifully put together and great proportions, and at 800 seats you'd never feel it. Like you just feel so intimately connected. And hence why I always love this idea of going, you know, how when you come out to here, the actors are going to be in the same room as you, but they can also be all the way back down here, and you can get that sense of the big picture, the big image of these 17 people on stage. It's just a wonderful experience, and intimate and grand. It's great. And you know, this is, I haven't done a show here since Odd Couple. Yeah, the Odd Couple. That was the last show I did before moving to the Sydney Festival. And so it's great to come back to this particular theatre and just feel the embrace of it. It does wrap around you and kind of hold you in a way that's... And you know, we talk in very personal terms with theatres because it is that. They do embrace you, they do hold you, they do kind of give you a sense of home and being rooted into a place, and that they are also sympathetic spaces. Not every theatre is, you know. Some of the ones that I've named are appalling. But here, there's something about this particular space, and I'm looking forward to the new theatre, what that might do for us as well. Like, if this is an indication of how we kind of can look after each other in a space, it's so important. And there is something quite sacred about telling a story in public. You know it yourself, those moments when you're starting to talk and the whole room goes hush and they listen to your story, and maybe you hold them for 3 minutes, maybe you hold them for 3 hours. But that wonderful kind of experience of being in a room together. I just note too that Peter Brook passed away today, who talked a lot about this idea of the empty space and about holding spaces and being together in that kind of shared sacred sense of storytelling. And I just like to think, and Jake and I have talked about this too, this notion of we are continuing a very, very long tradition, both from a First Nations perspective, but also almost every nation in the world has had this sense of sharing stories. And through that, we talk about, the mirror neuron, that idea that children watch a parent do something and through watching learn. and that often theatre has become that for society. By watching something play out on a stage, you have gone through in that cathartic experience. You go through what the characters go through. You set off the same neurological kind of response to the action on stage, and through watching it, you have actually experienced it. And therefore you can then take that experience into your life. And I think really intelligent people go to theatre. Well, because the act of going to the theatre is, number one, an act of intelligence. Number two, it helps your brain to keep growing and going into new and different experiences along the way. We've been talking about this show, but maybe people don't even know what the show's about. You may. Why don't we do that? The Sunshine Club is set in post-World War II in a place that looks a little like Brisbane. There's a river in the middle. There's a place called Cloudland. There's one particular song that talks about listen to the thunder from the Gabba down to Nunda. There's a few references to a place there, but it's a mythic place that just happens to look a lot like Brisbane. Frank Doyle, our hero, comes back from World War II full of ambition, full of a sense that life's different here now, that he's fought for freedoms and those freedoms were worth fighting for because now he can live the life he wants to live. He comes home to his family, his sister, Pearl Doyle, and their aunt, Auntie Faith, and they have grown up next door to the church and the presbytery, and Reverend Morris, who's the minister in charge there, and his daughter Rose. So Aboriginal family growing up next door to the church of this white family. Auntie Faith is the housekeeper for the presbytery, and as they've grown up together. And Rose is a singer. This particular night, she's going off to Cloudland to sing for the Lord Mayor's Victory Ball. And off Frank goes to listen to his childhood friend sing and is stopped at the door and not allowed in. And he goes, no, but I fought for this country. I should be allowed in. The doorman saying, well, no one told me. The rules are exactly the same. Frank gets really kind of down about this. And he then, they meet another Aboriginal person who's been bashed on the streets for crossing the river after dark, after the curfew. And they lift him up and they take him home to Auntie Faith. And they say, this isn't fair. This isn't how it should be. And so Frank says, let's set up a club of our own, a club that we can actually celebrate and the freedoms and hopes that we have. And Dave, the young Aboriginal man who's been bashed, said, yes, whatever it is, it should be the opposite of Cloudland. It should be where the sun shines. And they go, let's make the Sunshine Club. It's a little bit like Brigadoon. It comes whenever it's needed. And so they set up the Sunshine Club, and there's tensions along the way. And towards the middle, we start to realize that Rose and Frank, an Aboriginal man and a non-Aboriginal woman, are falling in love. And there's a sense of hope that this relationship in this club, in this mythical Brigadoon kind of place, or Murray-Doon as I like to call it, in this magical place is possible. At the end of Act 1, there's a kiss that gets witnessed by Reverend Morris. Interval. We come back in a world which maybe isn't all that it should be. Rose has won a singing competition and is going to London to finish her training. And there's a sense of what has their relationship become. And we start to realize that all parts of this club are starting to fall apart a bit.
That's enough.
Or does it? And then we have to find out what's about to happen. Those who have seen it before, you know too, that there is both a heartbreaking ending and also a hopeful ending. A world where it is possible, where Rose and Frank can dance together. In the Sunshine Club, there's a lyric in the building of the club which goes, we can dance with anyone, shake a leg with you and me at the Sunshine Club. And in many ways, that's what the show's about. How can we dance together, black and white, so that we have a future together.
Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Because obviously we can talk forever.
Wesley, do you see it having a life? This is Australia now. We've altered our constitution. We have another body in the parliament that is very active. Do you see this play having a life? Could it be transferred into, say, another 15, 10 years?
The question's about, does this play have another life on from here? Yes, it'll only take about 500,000. I'll just pass the hat around. Look, we live in hope. And just remember too, the Constitution has not yet changed. We've been talking about it, but haven't we? But it hasn't changed. So what do we need to do to get to that point? And I think that there's one of the joys of classics, and I'm not saying Sunshine Club is a classic, but the idea of a classic is that we return to it to test out how far we've come, how far we've grown, what's changed in our world. And I think that it's the reason why Shakespeare gets done again and again and again, because somehow we can go, oh, I remember the first time I saw Othello, and now I come and see a different Othello. And what does that mean? And you kind of keep shifting and changing your perspective. I would hope in 15 years' time, some young, precocious, entitled, arrogant person says, yep, I'm going to do this show and I'm going to do it much better. Because that's what you want along the way as well. But we live in hope, don't we? I mean, in many ways, we in theatre believe in the ephemeral. Why is it that I never kind of kept a copy of this script? Because in many ways, theatre is here and gone. And it lives in the memories of those who are left behind to talk the story. So this the ephemeral nature of what we do often kind of works against us as well, because we just don't have those records. But I think a lot of what we're doing now is keeping those records there so that there is, touch wood, masonite, that there is a future for the work. But look, that's only possible if you support theatre and if you support things to happen as well. So I'll pass the hat around.
Yeah, we absolutely archive all of the work that we do, yes. So there will be a filmed record of this. There was one, yes. So we were able to see it.
Well, just to say, the quality of it is literally like a single camera up the back, no close-ups, and the sound is of mixed quality. It's really archival. You wouldn't show it to anyone and expect them to have a great experience of watching it.
No. I mean, obviously in COVID times, there's been a lot more conversation about the filming of works. It's just a cost question. So we're not actually doing that for this one. It's really, at a certain point with COVID, the money's run out for some of that. We know that that's something we want to do more of. But we'll do a nice archive of this, but it'll be a provocation for people in the future to do it better.
We could pass around a second hat.
We could. We could. We're in the 5th week of rehearsal at the moment for this, so it's coming up to the pointy bit. We're into week 6 now. So in week 6 we come into the theatre, and by Saturday there will be a preview. So everything is very fast from this point on, and there's a lot of pizza involved in keeping people going.
Oh, Derek, go for it.
Sure. Okay. Well, what I can say, I actually saw the Sunshine Club, the first iteration, in Sydney, when I had a youth subscription to Sydney Theatre Company, and Sunshine Club was included in that year. So to be now working, I've worked in theatre since then, and to be on the other side of it now is quite an honour and a privilege, really.
It is an extraordinary play, and I do think there this is one of our classics. Wesley's not going to say that because, believe it or not, he can be modest from time to time. But I do believe this is one of our great stories. This is a Queensland classic that will be something that we return to across the ages. You can feel it shimmering inside the words on the page. Even in the shitty little archival, you can tell there's an energy that comes out of this. And, the last 50 years of theatre in Australia has been about building up our own stories, our own classics, finding our own Shakespeares. Now, I'm not going to say that, put Wesley and Shakespeare in the same place. Even that, for me, that's a little bit extreme. But I go, that's been the hunt.
Yeah, well, Shakespeare and I'll shake a spear.
Oh, okay, I'll pay that one. But this is one of our great stories, and it's a real privilege to come together with QPAC and bring it to to revisit it, for some audiences revisit it, and bring it to a next generation who maybe hadn't heard of it at all. And that's the exciting thing about the young artists who are in it, is that they'll bring a next generation of audience as well. Yes, it's the audience that gets to say whether there's a classic, but it's also part of the job of a state theatre company to have a memory and to bring things off the shelf. We actually have a shelf. We keep the costumes on purpose so that we can go back to things and mine the history of the theatre company for this next generation of artists. And it is actually a real honour to be bringing this story forward, Wesley. And thank you for the permission to do that. Yeah. Oh, okay, one more question. Oh, okay. This one isn't travelling. Touring has got a lot more expensive, and also touring in this time, again, we're still in a COVID time. What I'm hoping is that we do it really well so that other theatre companies go, we have to have that around the country, and that'll be the conversation with artistic directors around the country. I'm making them all come, and I'm promising them good weather when they do come. So work with me on this. Yeah, no, looking around, there's a pretty white group. No, it's true, but we've actually done a lot of work in the last few years of building relationships with different parts of the community, and the calls have gone out, and we don't obviously, when people book tickets, we don't get everybody's demographic information, but we're definitely sending calls out and inviting as many people as we can. So if you've got friends that you think should be seeing it and they haven't got their tickets yet, please get in touch and we'll start organising those tickets for them. Okay, one more. They're all okay, so in these COVID times, we have some understudying, but the difficulty is with some of the performers, you find me an understudy for Marcus Corowa. So we're playing chicken with a very big COVID truck, so the cast are all doing what they can. They're not going to the supermarkets, they're all having things delivered. They're not going out, and they're doing their best. But, it's a risk. There's no question it's a risk. And as you know, we lost a week of Bernhard Hamlet, lost a couple of plays already, and you go, I'm fairly sure it's not going to flood in here, though. Knock on wood, masonite. But I'm not, I'm thinking about slaughtering the odd lamb to appease whatever gods. No, look, it's the risk that we run at the moment, and thank you for running that risk with us and for staying with us across the last 3 years. It's been really hard to be a subscriber in the last 3 years, and we really appreciate the ongoing belief that what we do is worth hanging on to. We are coming out of it, and we are managing it, but it's possible that not all the shows will go on, but I'm just girding my loins and hoping, and so all I would say is don't change your tickets to a later date. If it's on that night, come that night. And on that note, I'm gonna call it, because this beautiful group of people have to keep going. So make sure that by Saturday there is a preview. But please join me in thanking them both for the work and their work. Oh, hang on, I've forgotten, of course. Oh my gosh, the most important thing, the Lucky Door Prize. Okay, all right. Wesley, you're going to have to... Nicolina's got the ice bucket. I was like, what is that object? It's an ice bucket. which seems quite appropriate.
And the winner is Pearl Doyle. That's a joke from the show. It is a black
That is
ticket.
our Pearl Doyle sitting in the audience, who should have been. Well,
What a
she's
surprise.
masked. That's good.
It's a black ticket E17.
E17. There we go. Awesome. That's wonderful.
What do they get?
Nicolene, what do they get? Double pass to Dendy Cinemas. So after seeing this, you can see Top Gun. Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. You're going to come up and we're going to give you the double pass. And thank you, and I'll see you in the theatre soon.
Thanks, everyone.